The deepest lake in the world is Lake Baikal in Russia, with a depth of over 1,600 meters, 5,249 feet. It is also the oldest lake in the world, with an age of about 25 million years. Canada is home to over 31,000 lakes, with an area exceeding 3 square kilometers, 1.16 square miles, making it the country with the largest number of major lakes on Earth. Lakes contribute to the diversity of life. Many species of plants and animals depend on lakes for survival. Lakes are important ecosystems that support biodiversity. Many cities and communities around the world depend on lakes as sources of potable water. What do you picture when you hear the word lake? Bathing in clean water and having a great vacation? There are lakes, one drop from which can cost you your health or even your life. Lakes can be silent killers, suffocating with accumulated gases, become a haven for incredible creatures, and can even explode. There are 304 million lakes in the world, and we've gathered for you the ones you'd better not go into. The world's most eerie lakes. Likes and subscriptions are growth engines for content. Like and subscribe to help this video find its audience and grow. The red waters of Lake Natron on the border of Tanzania and Kenya bring to mind alien landscapes, but it's better known as the Lake of Death. It's because of its composition. Its water has a high alkaline content with a pH of 9 to 12, while the allowable value for humans is almost 2 times lower. That is, it is a huge natural tub with a mixture of calcium and sodium salts, similar in composition to laundry detergent. These substances are contained in the lava of the volcano Ol Doño Lengai, oozing from the mountain. This cocktail will dissolve the ink on printed matter. It's also deadly to birds and animals. The lake is avoided by lizards, snakes, and even hyenas, which are not so easy to scare. So the Natron area is free of animals that hunt. Another deadly factor is its temperature. The lake is only 3 meters, 9.8 feet deep, so it warms up to 50 to 60 degrees Celsius, 122 to 140 degrees Fahrenheit during dry periods. Do you still find these waters beautiful? Then let's recount the story of English photographer Nick Brandt. One day, he was walking along Lake Natron and noticed the fossilized remains of a pigeon, an eagle, and a lesser flamingo at the bottom. The birds had fallen into the water and could no longer escape its embrace, turning into lime statues. They were killed by a lethal dose of lye, and then they calcified, that is, turned into limestone. During dry weather, the lake shallowed, and the feathered creatures remained on the cracked bottom, where Brent found them. The photographer collected the remains and arranged them in natural poses against the background of the water. These images spread around the world, making Natron famous. But why do birds even come near this lake? It's still not known exactly what makes them land on the water. It's thought to be because of its reflective power. The birds can't see the lake below and crash into it. But this hypothesis has not been confirmed. Amazingly, there is life in this deadly lake. In the water and on its surface, there is a small alkaline tilapia, as well as several species of bacteria and protozoan algae. The lake owes its fantastic red-orange color to the latter. The algae, in turn, are eaten by lesser flamingos. There are a huge number of them on the lake. But how can it be? Why don't the deadly waters have any effect on them? Actually, they do, but the flamingos choose a special time of year for their visit. From February to April, Natron is replenished by rainwater. Plus, a river of clean, safe water flows into the lake. As a result, the concentration of hazardous substances in it is reduced. So the lesser flamingos not only live on the lake, but even lay eggs. That's why natron is also called the flamingo factory. In these waters, 75% of all lesser pink flamingos in the world hatch. Imagine these beautiful birds standing in hot water and feeding on poisonous algae. The birds dip their beaks directly into the lake and filter their food out of the water. They don't get burned thanks to the tough skin and scales on their feet. By the way, flamingos can also drink salt water. We bet you won't be able to look at these birds the same way after this. And flamingos turn pink precisely because of the algae they eat, although initially they are born white or gray. That's because this food contains the pigment carotenoid. It's just like if your skin would turn red from eating beets. This is why tourists come to Natron, to admire the pink birds against the background of scarlet waters and sunset. When the dry season comes and the lake shrinks and the river that fills it dries up, Natron turns into a salt trap. But the flamingos are unaffected. By then, they'll have moved on to more pleasant places. But what happens if you fall into natron? According to the experts, you won't turn to stone. But if you have cuts or scratches on your body, they will burn like hell, as will your eyes, and your skin will blister because of the corrosive environment. The next lake is several times more dangerous than Chernobyl. This is Karachay, located in Russia, formerly the most polluted water body on Earth. And you wouldn't endure even 5 minutes near this place. Why former? Because it's now buried and mothballed. But first things first. This story begins on August 6, 1945, at a distance of 6,000 kilometers, 3,728 miles from Lake Karachay. On that day, the Americans dropped the atomic bomb Little Boy on the Japanese city of Hiroshima, and a nuclear arms race began. Looking ahead, I shall say that it had unforeseen consequences for the Russians. In November 1945, almost 2,000 kilometers, 1,242 miles from Moscow, they began building the USSR's first chemical plant to produce nuclear weapons components. Over the next 3 years, according to participants of the events, 70,000 prisoners built a secret facility, the Mayak Production Association's 7 nuclear reactors. Next to it grew an equally secret city of nuclear scientists, workers, and their families called Chelyabinsk 40. We bet you wouldn't want to live in such a place. Just imagine what it's like, behind barbed wire, and you can't leave the territory without a special permit. The residents of the town were forbidden even to write letters. The first reactor of Mayak, PA was launched in June 1948. And there was no normal waste disposal. It was dumped into the Techa River until the maximum permissible dose of harmful substances was exceeded by 3.5 times. And this is not like leaving a bag of garbage near a container. To solve this problem, it was decided to dump liquid radioactive waste into Lake Karachay in 1951. During the time when the lake was used as a dump, it accumulated 150 million curies of long-lived nuclear waste. This exceeds the radiation waste from Chernobyl 6 times. But Karachay became a mistake for scientists. The lake constantly dried up, and dangerous radioactive dust formed on the bare shores. According to calculations, if a tornado had occurred when the lake was drying up to 20,000 people could have died from radiation damage. However, it is not necessary to wait for a tornado. It is enough to stand next to such a source for 15 minutes to get an enormous dose of radioactive exposure of 600 roentgens. It probably won't be lethal, but your life will never be the same. And if you stay an hour longer, you definitely won't be alive. This creepy place quickly grew rumors, which in conditions of total secrecy became even more terrible details. Thus, it was said that fish from Karachay resembled heroes of horror movies. Carp shone like lanterns, and crucian carps had neither eyes nor tail, and their scales grew not towards the tail, but towards the head. On September 29, 1957, a technogenic disaster occurred in the history of Karachay. The cooling system at Mayak, PA was disturbed, as a result of which a stainless steel tank with 70 to 80 tons of nuclear waste exploded. The radioactive cloud rose to a height of 2 kilometers, 1.2 miles, and covered several regions of Russia. And locals saw something similar to the Northern Lights. Do you think beauty can't be deadly? In fact, it was a cloud of radioactive dust and smoke that shimmered with different colors. In the end, 217 communities, where 272,000 people lived, were contaminated. This accident ranks third in the world in terms of environmental damage. The concentration of radiation in the lake exceeded all imaginable limits. And in 1967, strong winds lifted tons of radioactive materials from the shores. 41,500 people in 63 settlements were affected. The secret of Lake Karachay came out, and the management of the Mayak, PA decided to raise the shores along the entire perimeter of the reservoir. The surface of the lake became smaller. For the next 4 years, the water level in Karachay was under close observation. And then it went up sharply, and it was decided to completely backfill the lake. It was started only in 1986, after the infamous Chernobyl accident. And in 1988, the lake began to be covered with rock slabs. The last elements were installed in 2015. This is when the mothballing ended. It cost Russia about $174 million, and the lake will only require another $2 million to be maintained. The mothballed reservoir is believed to be safe. The rock cover prevents radiation from leaking out. The surface is planned to be planted with shrubs and grass, but not trees. Their roots would weaken the rock. However, in theory, the lake's underground water could reach other reservoirs, and then the radioactive substances would travel with them. The consequences would be terrible. The soil, drinking water sources, and reservoirs of nearby cities would be poisoned. So this lake is not to be messed with. What could a volcano and a lake have in common? No, it's not the temperature, and it's not the bowl shape. It's the serial killer potential. Lake of 1,000 Deaths, Nyos, is located in the crater of a volcano in Cameroon, near the border with Nigeria. It has a small area, 1.6 square kilometers, 0.6 square miles, and an impressive depth of 209 meters, 686 feet, which is almost the size of a 70-story house. The lake was formed on this spot 400 years ago, and for a long time, nothing foreshadowed disaster. No one knew that deadly gas was accumulating beneath these quiet waters. The fact is that the volcano was extinct only on the surface and continued to form large amounts of carbon dioxide, CO2, from igneous rock under Lake Nyos. It met the groundwater, dissolved in it, and so entered the reservoir. As a result, over 1 cubic kilometer of carbon dioxide accumulated in the bottom layers. If this volume were filled with drinking water, it would be enough for 40 days for all mankind, provided that everyone would drink 3 liters a day. So the poisonous gas accumulated at depth, and for some reason did not mix with the upper layers. We can guess the reason though. If it was cool in Cameroon, the water on the surface of the lake would cool and lower, and warm water from the depths would come up instead. Then carbon dioxide would rise from the bottom and dissipate into the atmosphere before reaching dangerous concentrations. But it's always hot in Cameroon, so there is no such movement in the Nyos. The water doesn't cool down and doesn't mix. Simply put, there was a bomb growing at the bottom of the lake for thousands of years until it exploded on August 21st, 1986. What disturbed the fragile balance? It is believed that part of the berm surrounding the reservoir collapsed. A 25-meter, 82-foot tsunami rose, and the layers of Lake Nyos got mixed up. As a result, huge amounts of poisonous gas escaped into the atmosphere. These kinds of events are called limnological disasters. I couldn't speak. I couldn't even open my mouth. I went to my daughter's bed, thinking she was sleeping, but she was already dead. It was only the next day that I had the strength to leave the house. All my neighbors were also dead. This is how one of the few witnesses of the disaster who managed to survive describes the aftermath. Just imagine, in a matter of minutes, 1,746 people and over 3,500 livestock were killed by carbon dioxide from Lake Nyos. About 1,000 more people sought medical attention. Notably, some villages were located within 25 kilometers, 15.5 miles from the source of the disaster. Not even the birds and insects around Nyos could survive, and the grass turned black and shriveled. Scientists estimate that the concentration of carbon dioxide in the air exceeded 30%, while the normal value is 0.04%. It was near the surface of the ground that the gas spread because it is heavier than air. The result, people lost consciousness and died of asphyxiation. The rescuers who arrived had almost no one to save. Interestingly, the few survivors claimed to have smelled rotten eggs and heard a powerful explosion at the time of the disaster. This could have happened in an explosive-type volcanic eruption, but the samples taken did not confirm it, and the source of the unpleasant odor apparently was hydrogen sulfide, which was contained in the bottom layers of the lake together with carbon dioxide and other gases. There was another mystery. Residents of the village 10 kilometers from the lake claimed that they felt the bad smell and heard the explosion at the same time, although the gas needed half an hour to pass this distance, while the sound covered it in only 32 seconds. A remarkable fact is that immediately after the tragedy, the lake became red-brown in color due to oxidization. Do you think that was the end of it? Well, it's not. The killer lake is not dozing, and the gas continues to accumulate in the bottom layers, about 5 million cubic meters, 176.6 million cubic feet per year. That is 185 million cubic meters. 6,533,000,000 cubic feet have already accumulated since the disaster. And this means that the reservoir can deliver another powerful pop. So you have to be extremely careful near this lake. However, the authorities have not let the things rip. They are carrying out degassing and other similar measures to keep people safe. Legends say that just one drop of water from the following Italian water body can cause a severe burn. It's all about the killing chemical composition of the Lake of Death in southern Sicily. It's fed by 2 underground springs with sulfuric acid, so there is no wonder that not even microorganisms can survive in it. The water is completely lifeless. Moreover, because of the lake's vapors, nothing grows around it within a radius of 1 kilometer, 0.6 miles, and the nearest forest is 5 kilometers, 3 miles away. Birds that choose to land on the shore of the Lake of Death die. But here's a strange fact. With such extraordinary properties, the lake is little known in its homeland. Most Sicilians have never heard of this relentless killer. However, it is rumored that the Sicilian mafia was well aware of this dead lake. According to legends on the internet, the mafia thugs used it to dispose of the corpses of their enemies and even execute the ones out of favor. After all, the waters of the lake dissolve the body in a matter of hours, and some even claim that it takes minutes. so there are hundreds of unlucky souls who have found their final resting place at the bottom of the lake. In other words, this reservoir phenomenon is regularly on the list of the most terrible places on Earth, despite all its beauty. It also has one major drawback. It doesn't exist. The Lake of Death in Sicily is a popularized myth. In fact, there are thermal lakes of Yellowstone National Park in the United States that are often shown on the photos claimed as photos of this lake. On them, we see deep turquoise water with red-orange shores. It is one of the most mesmerizing views. Sometimes the photos are mirrored, but what unites all these photos is the yelling color of the water, which immediately confirms the terrible reputation of this place. At different times, such Yellowstone lakes as Chromatic Pool, Grand Prismatic Spring, Morning Glory Pool, and Emerald Pool were disguised as this acidic reservoir. But is there a prototype? Or is it all just one big hoax, you may ask? Yes, there is. It is the Sicilian lake, Lago Naftia. It was studied by volcanologist Gaetano Ponte at the turn of the 19th and 20th centuries, and he took a lot of photos. He found out that the waters of Lago Naftia were bubbling because of abundant carbon dioxide emissions, not because of sulfuric acid. The lake was of modest size, only 146 meters, 480 feet in circumference, and no more than 5 meters, 16 feet deep. By 1908, it had begun to shallow. However, by 1935, the water level may have risen again. But most interestingly, there are no modern photos of the Lake of Death, except those of Yellowstone. The thing is that it was drained in the second half of the 20th century, and a gas production facility was erected in its place. What do you think of our small investigation? Parents do not let their children bathe in this lake and warn tourists. It has a really bad reputation of being cursed. But why? There are many reasons, and most of them are overgrown with legends. Locals believe that it all started about 100 years ago, when a man went mad with jealousy for his bride and drowned her in the lake. Eventually, the lake became uninhabited, and inexplicable phenomena started to occur there. Even if you do not believe in them, you'd better not go into the dead lake because it conceals real dangers. In this respect, the elder of a nearby village was lucky. He went swimming in the lake as a boy, despite the prohibitions of adults, and this, of course, did not go without a trace. Feel what was happening to him. As soon as you step into the water, it becomes difficult to breathe and to move your legs and arms. Then a fog wraps your mind and you sink into darkness. The boy woke up near the lake. His hands were torn into blood and his body was aching. But the most interesting thing came out when he finally reached the village. The swimmer was missing for 2 weeks, and everyone already thought he was dead. At least, that's what he claims. The locals say there are many people who have experienced the same things as the future elder. They've all disappeared near the lake, and then suddenly reappeared. But it was impossible to find out what happened to them, because they all lost their memory for that period. But let's move away from legends and try to explain these terrible stories from a scientific point of view. First, it is believed that the water body is toxic and unable to support life. That's why there are no fish and insects here. The only inhabitants of the dead lake in Kazakhstan are green algae and purple bacteria at the bottom. That's where its name comes from. Hydrologist Iskander Tursunov notes that mercury mines were once located near the lake. Some of the hazardous waste from them may have gotten into the lake through underground springs. As a result, a lot of hydrogen sulfide has formed in the lake, which kills fish. Secondly, the lake never dries up, and the water always stays cool, even in hot weather. One could see mysticism here, but in fact, scientists explain this mystery by the fact that the lake was formed as a result of the activity of ancient glaciers and lies in the funnel of glacial deposits. Third, the lake is known to be 100 meters, 328 feet long, and 60 meters, 197 feet wide. But no one has been able to measure its depth, so it remains unrecorded. Rumor has it that divers are starting to feel unwell because of the physical properties of the water, and no measurements have been taken in any other way. Fourth, it owes part of its notoriety to drowned people. According to locals, almost every year, dozens of people drown in the lake and disappear without a trace. The creepiest thing is that they do not rise to the surface, but remain standing on the bottom. Just imagine this forest of human bodies. However, this is also likely a myth, as some of the interviewed locals have never heard of real cases of drowning on the lake. Finally, fifthly, the lake is so salty that only the above-mentioned algae and purple bacteria, which produce hydrogen sulfide, can live in it. And this substance, with a typical odor, causes disorders in people, even in small doses. Having inhaled it, a person can lose his mind for a while and see hallucinations. This may be the explanation of all the strange things that happened on the lake. And we move on to a body of water in the Caribbean. Just giving you a heads up, guys. Don't even think about dipping your hand into this lake. Its water temperature reaches 82 to 92 degrees Celsius, 180 to 198 degrees Fahrenheit. Just so you know, that's how the boiling lake earned its name. This natural wonder lies in the Morne Trois Poteaux National Park in the Caribbean nation of Dominica, on the slope of the Morne Watt volcano. This region is known for its high volcanic activity. The park covers an area of 7,000 hectares, 27 square miles. In addition to Boiling Lake, it has 5 of the island's 9 volcanoes and dozens of hot springs and fumaroles. That is, cracks or holes in the Earth's crust that can connect to subterranean magma. This lake is just a flooded volcanic fumarole, which is why jets of hot air and even lava can blow underwater. Naturally, swimming here is not a good idea unless you want to be boiled alive. But if you are a daring soul, you could replicate the feat of American director George Coronis. In 2007, he became the first person ever to cross the lake on a rope above it. This moment was filmed for the Angry Planet TV series. The most crucial thing here is timing, because the fumarole activity varies during different periods. For example, in 2006, gas emissions were minimal. But in early 2009, the lake was boiling like mad. The water in the lake is grayish blue. Its color is attributed to dissolved materials and gases. Normally, it is heated up by hot steam and gases, which make the lake a fascinating sight to behold, with clouds of steam hanging above it. Measuring approximately 60 by 75 meters, 197 by 246 feet, it ranks as the world's second largest hot lake, after Frying Pan Lake in New Zealand. The Boiling Lake was discovered back in 1870 by 2 Englishmen, Edmund Watt and Henry Nichols. At that time, they were working in Dominica and exploring this unique place. They measured the water's temperature, but only at the edges, because it was too dangerous to reach the center. They also measured its depth, which turned out to be 60 meters, 197 feet. However, this figure is debatable. Today, the lake is believed to be only 15 meters, 49 feet deep. But this is where volcanic activity comes into play. You know about the complex origins of the lake, right? Given the magmatic activity, the initial depth might indeed have been 60 meters, 197 feet. But a century later, it appears to have decreased by nearly 4 times. Yet, these aren't the only mysteries the lake beholds. One day in 1980, it almost vanished. An eruption led to a geyser of hot water and steam and almost dried it up. Then the lake gradually refilled. A quarter of a century later, in 2004, another eruption caused the water level in Boiling Lake to drop by 10 meters. This persisted for 5 months, but astonishingly, the lake was replenished in just a single day. If you want to see the lake with your own eyes, you will have to work hard to get there. It's situated 13 kilometers uphill from the closest road. Furthermore, along the way, you'd have to encounter sulfur springs and hot pools. We don't advise taking this journey without a guide. Legend has it that those who approached Lake Brosno with evil thoughts were devoured by a merciless monster. Emerging from the watery depths, it would open its huge mouth. The fairy tale says that this monster's first victim was the Scandinavian leader who sought to transport the stolen goods to the other side of the lake. Then a monster rose from the depths, destroyed the boat, and devoured everyone who was on it. The Mongol Khan met a similar fate, swallowed whole along with his boat. A more recent legend from the 20th century claims that during World War II, a German plane plummeted into the lake but was never found. Since then, Lake Brosno has become a source of dread. Some stories reinforce this dread even today. Would you risk swimming across this water body after everything you now know? Do you see these stories as mere fairy tales from the past? Yet, there is some evidence to this day. In 1992, a resident of one of the nearby villages noticed a creature that resembled an ancient dinosaur, about 5 meters, 16.4 feet long, basking on the coastal sand. In 2001, rumors had it that the monster claimed the life of a young girl right in front of her parents. Little did we know, there was more to come. One fateful day, a boat with the bodies of several young people washed ashore. The faces of all 3 were distorted in horror. It was the same horror that seized the local residents, who eventually decided to vacate the area around Brosno. Of the numerous villages, only a handful remain. Drawing parallels with the Loch Ness Monster, aka Nessie, this creature was dubbed Brosnia. The mounting tales tested the patience of scientists who decided once and for all to tell the truth from fiction. The first thing they found out was that the rumors about Brosnia benefited a certain businessman who was going to build a guest house on the shore of the lake. New details of the legend would attract more tourists to this place, ensuring a high revenue. Secondly, they found that the surrounding villages left their homes not because of the monster, but because of poverty. Yet, tales of the monster date back to ancient times, long before opportunistic entrepreneurs were around. Then, scientists began to explore the water body and determined that its depth would not support such a large creature. While 43 meters, 141 feet might seem deep for a lake, it's insufficient for a massive ancient predator. In addition, it simply wouldn't have enough food. But the lake itself seemed to challenge the scientists' argument. One day, its waters began to boil, as if preparing to unleash the legendary beast. Undeterred, the scientists released a firecracker into the bubbling mass. While they never encountered the monster, they did detect a potent scent of hydrogen sulfide. From that point, the monster was debunked. It turned out to be accumulations of methane and hydrogen sulfide. The culprit was the decomposition process triggered by plants and trees falling into the lake. When the water pressure acted on these gases, they were released. Any abrupt disturbance over a hydrate cushion, like casting an anchor for example, could trigger such an eruption. And from the shore, the resulting crater looked like the open mouth of a monster. Add to this fact that these gases seriously affect a person's well-being and can induce hallucinations. It's easy to see how bubbles and foam might be misconstrued as signs of a lurking beast in this state. By the way, even the bottom topography remains a mystery. The exact depth of the lake is unknown. Due to crevices and depressions, it may not be 43 meters, 141 feet, but as many as 60 meters, 197 feet. Add to this the thick sediment layer, which in some places exceeds 5 meters, 16.4 feet. Therefore, you cannot know for sure who lives at the bottom. But we definitely don't recommend swimming in this lake or walking next to it. What's the one thing you don't want to catch in a lake? A piece of trash? A predatory fish? A rat? We bet you wouldn't like one fisherman's catch off the south shore of Lake Tahoe on the California-Nevada border in the U.S. Rumor has it that a few years ago, he reeled in a well-preserved human ear, although someone claims that it was a 3-fingered hand. But how did this eerie find end up there? And what other mysteries does this body of water hold? Let's figure this out. Lake Tahoe is the second deepest in the United States and the 17th deepest in the world. It is 501 meters, 1,643 feet deep. The lake stretches 35 kilometers, 21.7 miles in length, and spans 19 kilometers, 11.8 miles in width. Originally, the Washoe people, a Great Basin tribe of Native Americans, lived around the lake. They named this place Da'oaga, which translates to edge of the lake. With the arrival of white explorers, only the first part of this name persisted, Da'o, which evolved into Tahoe. In the native Indian language, this term means grasshopper soup. So, how did a human body part end up in its waters? Local lore suggests that between the 1920s and 1950s, the mafia used the South Shore as a dumping ground for their victims. This tale reminds us of our favorite mythical lake in Sicily, doesn't it? If you were to believe this legend, the lake's depths would be littered with hundreds of corpses, preserved by the cold water temperatures. But is this story pure fiction? Many fishermen refer to this spot as the cemetery. And the second installment of The Godfather depicts the mafia's execution on a boat. Now let's take a closer look at that place in the lake. Can't you see anything? Perhaps Tessie is lurking there right now. The local aquatic creature was named by analogy with the Loch Ness Monster, otherwise known as Nessie. Of course, just like in the case of the Scottish folklore character, its existence hasn't been scientifically proven. The beast was first mentioned in Native American legends and was later reported by white settlers in the 19th century. Tessie made headlines these days in the San Francisco Chronicle in 1984. Then he was allegedly seen by 2 residents of Tahoe City, Patsy McKay and Diane Stavrakis. They were walking above the western shore when they noticed an incredible creature in the lake. McKay claimed the beast was about 5.1 meters, 17 feet long. She watched it closely and saw it surface like a small submarine 3 times. According to her companion, the creature had a humped back and was moving like a whale. McKay was firmly convinced that it wasn't a diver, a log, or a large ripple. 2 years earlier, 2 police officers claimed to have encountered Tessie. Officers Chris Beebe and Jerry Jones were off duty when an unusually large creature swam past them. But the mysteries of the lake don't end there. It is believed that an underground river system connects Tahoe to Pyramid Lake in Nevada. This is evidenced by the bodies of people who drowned in Tahoe resurfacing in Pyramid Lake, 80 kilometers, 50 miles to the north. Even the famous oceanographer Jacques Cousteau tried to unravel the secrets of the lake in the mid-1970s. After several dives, he allegedly uttered the famous phrase, "The world isn't ready for what is down there." Whether he really said this or not remains a mystery, but one thing is clear: you need to be extremely careful in this lake. The next lake became famous thanks to its inhabitants, who resemble some weird sci-fi creatures. Here's how the story goes. On a bright morning, Eric Osinski set out for a fishing trip, unaware that his day would soon make headlines. His son tagged along with him. They were going to catch trout in a stream that flows into Lake Champlain on the United States-Canada border. The fishermen arrived at the spot, prepared their gear, and quietly settled in. Before long, they had a bite. They managed to catch 2 trout. This was one of those exciting moments that could make your hands shake. Unfortunately for Eric, while he was adjusting the net, one fish slipped away, and the other snapped the line. The fishing didn't start the way he and his son planned, but their luck seemed to turn when they felt another tug on their lines. Osinski looked at the catch and recoiled in horror. What they caught was a far cry from trout. In fact, the creature resembled the Sarlacc monster from Star Wars, or a hybrid of a snake and a leech. It had a slippery body which was extra hard to hold, and a funnel-shaped mouth full of sharp teeth. It was about 60 centimeters or 24 inches long. The very touch of this alien-like creature repulsed Osinski, but he still picked it up and took a photograph. He later published the photo on social media and received hundreds of comments. Only then did he learn he had caught a lamprey. A lot of people wrote about their impressions in the comments. One of the commenters said, "I didn't even think that you could catch such a monster with a fishing rod." Others mentioned the fact that these creatures harm the ecosystem. Osinski didn't take the catch with him. After taking a picture of the lamprey, he released it into the lake. Lampreys are often called suckerfish, but in fact, they are external parasites of large fish. They belong to the jawless class of animals and predate most fish, which is why they are also called prehistoric vampires. Distinct from most fish, lampreys have cartilaginous bodies and lack scales or fins, making them very difficult to hold. They possess 7 gill openings on each side of the body, earning them a cool nickname, flutes. These creatures thrive in the vast Lake Champlain, which spans 172 kilometers in length and reaches 120 meters deep. Lampreys swim in search of prey, latch onto them with their funnel-shaped mouths, and feed on the fish's blood. They can be as small as 10 centimeters, 3.9 inches long, or up to a meter, 3.3 feet long. Such lampreys pose a threat even to large salmon. Lampreys weren't documented in Lake Champlain until 1929. Whether they've always inhabited the lake or were introduced by humans remains a mystery. According to recent research, lampreys could have lived in the lake as early as 10,000 years ago. They are the only drawback of freshwater Champlain, which has no dangerous currents and a normal chemical composition. Lampreys have caused a massive decline in the local fish population, which is why authorities took measure to manage these toothy creatures. To control their population, the authorities used chemicals that lampreys couldn't process, unlike other animals living in the lake. Over time, they hope to completely eradicate lampreys. For now, swimmers are wary of Lake Champlain's depths, named after the French explorer Samuel de Champlain. While scientists generally dismiss the idea of lampreys attacking humans, a 2018 report of a diver's encounter with one caught the attention of freshwater detective and biologist Jeremy Wade. He couldn't confirm any lamprey attacks on humans, but managed to track several large individuals and was even bitten by one of them. So it's better to stay clear of these waters. Take a look at this lake. It looks calm, doesn't it? Yet, it poses a significant threat to 2 million people. So why is it dangerous? Lake Kivu lies in the heart of Africa. Its western part is located in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, and the eastern part is in Rwanda. Kivu is part of the African Great Lakes system. These lakes are notably deep because of the large tectonic faults in the Earth's crust that run through the entire African continent. At its deepest, Kivu reaches 480 meters, 1,575 feet, ranking it the 10th deepest lake in the world. Geologically, this region has its challenges. Firstly, the fault housing the lake is constantly expanding and deepening. Secondly, there are several volcanoes nearby, which sometimes make their presence felt. Both of these factors led to the accumulation of carbon dioxide at the bottom of the lake, which comes from the Earth's core. It is partially transformed into methane thanks to bacteria living in the water column. This gas also accumulates on the lake bed. Another unique feature of this lake is its minimal evaporation rate due to high air humidity and constant high temperatures. Because of this, there is a layer of water vapor above the lake's surface which interferes with evaporation. Considering the lake's immense depth combined with its limited evaporation, it becomes clear that the water masses are largely stagnant. As a result, gases don't dissipate gradually, but accumulate over time. It's impossible to say the exact volume of gases at the bottom of Kivu, but this is definitely the largest value among all the lakes on the planet. That is, the lake behaves like an unopened soda. CO2 remains dissolved in the water. In both the lake and a soda can, carbon dioxide dissolves faster under high pressure and in cold conditions. Therefore, soda bubbles only appear when someone opens the can and CO2 is released. But let's go a step back and remember that the pressure at the bottom of the lake is higher than at the surface. Given Lake Kivu's depth, the pressure at its base, where vast amounts of CO2 have accumulated, is extremely high, which makes it very unstable. All it takes is some kind of shock, say a volcano eruption or an earthquake, for the lake to explode. Such an event would force the CO2-rich water into the upper, less pressurized layers of the lake that can no longer hold it. As a result, bubbles would surface, followed by a rising column of gas, culminating in an explosion. So imagine that Lake Kivu is a giant soda can that you can shake and then open. In other words, this lake faces the threat of a limnological eruption similar to the one that occurred on Lake Nyos. However, there's a crucial distinction. Kivu is vastly larger than Lake Nyos and contains a significantly greater volume of gas, 65 cubic kilometers, 15.6 cubic miles of methane, and 256 cubic kilometers, 61.4 cubic miles of CO2. Yet there are lots of resorts and hotels on its shores. Moreover, geologists have found evidence that Kivu erupts every 1,000 years, destroying a significant part of the local wildlife. Interestingly, an explosion isn't the only potential hazard. Instead, the accumulated gas may come out and poison everyone in the vicinity. What efforts do we make to address this problem? Authorities are extracting dangerous gases. For instance, the Rwandan government has established a power plant on its part of the lake, which harnesses energy by burning the gas mixture from the bottom of Kivu. They plan to build another power plant. Let's hope it makes this dangerous place a little safer. Nature is truly breathtaking. The same place can be both stunningly beautiful and deadly at the same time. The same place can simultaneously evoke fascination and fear. Lakes have long captivated people. They were worshipped, served as relaxation spots, and provided sustenance. To this day, the incomprehensible beauty and mystery of the lakes continue to attract nature lovers and travelers. However, before visiting any of the lakes from our list, consider all the risks involved and be ready to face their dark side.